Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster. Today, we want to focus on the ripple effect that Donald Trump's struggling campaign is having on conservative media. Fox News is acutely aware that Trump is losing traction in the polls. It is tamping down conservative voter energy and enthusiasm, which could then lead to a disastrous outcome for Trump and his party and Fox on Election Day. So to support the former president, Fox News keeps implying that voters should choose Trump despite their personal dislike of him, because Trump would ultimately be better than Harris, they say, for the economy.
I want to put this up. This really struck me. This is battleground state inflation. So obviously huge repercussions for the election here. In battleground states, you see prices up in Pennsylvania by 18.9%, Wisconsin by 20.5%, and it goes on and on. Not a soft landing, Morgan, in the states you need to win.
Well, and I think that's why you see Secretary Yellen and other people from the Biden administration saying, no, this economy is so amazing. Look at what's happening, because, as you pointed out, because this is the key issue for so many voters. And that's what I think people will really decide whenever they go into the ballot box. Not only, traditionally you vote for who do I like the most, who do I dislike, who do I want to have a beer with, right? I think we're so beyond that as a society now.
We are so beyond personal feelings or following our gut. I'm not sure about that. But to be fair to Fox News, inflation is the Democrats' weakest point in this election. And the incumbent party, the party that's been in the White House the past several years, often has to tread carefully on economic issues. However, the idea that rational, level-headed people who dislike Trump will hold their noses and still rush to the ballot box to vote for Trump is absurd. Nonetheless, that doesn't stop Fox News hosts from trying to force this narrative into reality through their on-air panel discussions. The Fox host even goes so far as to suggest that inflation is a result of left-leaning policies.
Harris says she's going to outline a plan for wealth creation this week, but it's kind of hard to build wealth when the cost of goods is 20% higher over the last 4 years.
Well, and that's the whole point. So with Janet Yellen's op-ed where she says, Americans have fallen on hard times, will help get you out. Who do you think created the hard times, sister?
Hey, Emily Campano, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is not your sister. Yellen would probably not even want to respect you as a household pet. The bottom line is that the hard times with inflation are not as simplistic as the simpletons like Emily on Fox News keep asserting. When the U.S. economy reignited after the pandemic, there was a lot of pent-up demand for goods and services, and the speed with which the economy grew contributed to the higher prices. The amount of money the Biden-Harris administration put into infrastructure projects and middle-class tax breaks also contributed. But there was another major factor that also fueled inflation and higher prices: corporate greed and price gouging. America's biggest corporations took advantage of supply chain hiccups and a rise in consumer demand to raise prices. And in many cases, the corporations raised prices far beyond what the laws of supply and demand would have suggested. It's no accident that corporate profits hit record levels. But again, this was largely due to price gouging and greed, both of which fueled inflation and made nearly every product more expensive. The point here, which will be lost on a lot of conservative news consumers, is that the economy and inflation are far more complex than the Fox hosts would have you believe. The Biden-Harris administration policies are not solely responsible for inflation. And by the way, inflation has gone down for 11 straight months, something you will never hear on Fox. But if you want to follow the Fox logic of blaming Democrats for everything in the economy, then you also have to give Democrats sole credit for all of the successes. The stock market keeps setting new records, with the Dow recently sailing over 42,000. Over the past 3.5 years, more than 16 million jobs have been created, including 800,000 in manufacturing. In the first 3.5 years of the Trump administration, the economy added only 6.8 million jobs and had a net loss in manufacturing. Was the Biden-Harris administration solely responsible for the growth? Of course not. But that's the logic Fox wants to selectively apply to issues in the economy that Americans do not like.
Janet Yellen has been totally incompetent in her job the entire time. Remember in the banking crisis of last year, a little over a year ago, she said nothing to see here. She enjoyed weighing in about Ukraine and abortion and other progressive policies. But the reality is that Americans were totally frightened as their assets were plummeting in value. Her answer, as she outlined in that op-ed, is to give more, right? Don't worry about you guys on hard times. We're going to give you more. We're going to give you a handout. We're going to give you this break. We don't need more of our money coming back to us. What we need is a lifting of the stifling regulations, is a lifting of those ridiculous antithetical policies so that inflation goes down, so that the value of goods, in fact, is commensurate with the price, so that my 401k doesn't plummet even more.
Thankfully, most Americans recognize that economic issues involve several moving parts and pieces. And a growing number of Americans seem to understand that the economy over the last 50 years has done far better during Democratic administrations than Republican administrations. The economic data and facts do not lie, even if Fox News does. But all of the selective outrage and suspension of reality in conservative media will soon face a reckoning if Kamala Harris, as the poll suggests, wins this election. The Republican Party, with its prioritization of corporate interests, will implode, and there will be a realignment of GOP policies and leadership. There is a faction within the Republican Party that believes our political system is rigged by the elites and corporations, and if there's one area of agreement with many progressives, it's the belief that corporations have too much power and influence over our politics and our government. Could the right and the left finally unite on campaign finance reform and the effort to put some controls and limits on the corporate money sloshing through politics? Maybe, but that kind of change is hard. It's a lot easier for Fox News and other conservative mouthpieces to simply keep lying about the fundamental issues of our time, including the economy, whether an election is clean, and even the basic reality of things like crime. You won't hear it on Fox, but crime rates just hit their lowest levels in 50 years. Now, this is not just an election between Harris and Trump, but it's between reality versus fantasy land, between basic facts versus wild conspiracy theories, between democracy versus authoritarianism, and between stability versus instability. Deep down in the halls of Fox News, I think that even their hosts understand the stakes. But even Fox is confused and frightened about the possible and increasingly likely pivot away from Trump.
Well, it would be nice to live in the fanciful economy of Janet Yellen. We all wish we lived in that romanticized world.
I'm David Schuster. Thanks for joining us.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.